The Analysis of the History and the Ethics Behind Genetic Engineering by Daphne Singer. Good day, Mr. Tabry. Today I'll be talking about my findings of my integrative seminar project. I chose to talk about genetic manipulation because it is a century's hot topic and one that has always intrigued me, notably that of its historical and ethical components. I am currently finishing my studies at Dawson in the Commerce program, which is part of social sciences. History and ethics are the two disciplines of my program that I chose to relate to my research topic. Thus, the thesis of my research paper was to analyze the issues that genetic manipulation present by exploring the historical evolution of the science, as well as its uses and implications, and the ethical dilemmas that arise from the science in order to further assess its pros and cons. To begin, I will explain what exactly genetic engineering is. Genetic engineering is the process of modifying the characteristics of an organism by manipulating its DNA. The ways that scientists conduct this process is complex and continues to evolve. This is why I decided to deep dive into the history of genetic engineering and its experiments in order to further understand its uses and implications. What I found was that the earliest conducted experiments consisted of ones used in the agricultural sector, mainly to lengthen the life cycles of plants. Experts were able to give plants desired traits by altering their DNA sequences and mixing their DNA with that of an organism with a desired trait. As an example, a gene that prompted faster blooming was introduced into apple trees, and this resulted in sped-up growth in those apple trees for 5 to 6 generations. As time went by and research became more relevant, genetic modification became a whole new ballgame with endless possibilities. This is primarily thanks to a new technological advancement in the field in 1987 called CRISPR. CRISPR brought scientists an inexpensive and precise way to delete, insert, or replace genes. It can be used to eliminate diseases such as HIV, or it is simply used to test on animals in order to provide researchers with insight on how diseases develop. Most genetically engineered experiments were conducted on rats, and if you look at the photo that is on my screen right now, you can see a picture of a genetically modified apple versus an organic apple. So the organic apple is the one on the right, and the genetically modified apple is the one on the left. So we can see that there is a huge difference, and genetically modified organisms are the result of this. In 2018, a Chinese scientist named Jianku was able to manipulate the genes of 2 twin girls who were carriers of the HIV gene by their father. His wish was to completely delete the gene from their genetic makeup. However, the results of this fairly recent experiment have yet to be proven, and this experiment has actually raised many ethical dilemmas. So much so that Jianku and his collaborators were imprisoned for their work because they failed to do the one thing that scientists are supposed to do before they conduct any research. Now, what is this? This is to weigh the potential benefits and potential risks of their work before beginning. Not only was Jianku not taking into consideration the potential dangers to the unborn children, he was also ignoring the fact that it could potentially affect their future progeny. Some even believe that this kind of genetic manipulation, when malconducted, could actually make irreversible consequences to the genetic makeup of a population, which is clearly a very bad thing. In the photo on the left bottom hand side of my screen, you can see Professor Jianku, who was actually sentenced to 3 years of prison with his collaborators. On the right, you have the ultrasounds of the genetically modified twins. I will now move on to talk about the ethical dilemmas that arise from genetic engineering. So, if we look at Jianku, what he did wrong in terms of ethics was that he did not assess the risks of his work. The second ethical issue that arises with genetic engineering is that the science could affect human equality by creating social disparities. The concept of genetic enhancement is one that allows someone to change their genetic makeup and improve it. This is not only unnatural, but it will give someone who has more financial opportunities accessibility to the technology and the ability to use it, whereas the less fortunate will not have this opportunity. And of course, this opportunity that I'm talking about is the chance for a parent to select a desired trait for their child and have a child or a future generation of that same child with those desired traits. This leads me to the third ethical issue that I have found in my research, which is referred to as eugenics. Eugenics is the promotion of the idea that some groups in society are superior because they have some kind of desirable traits, and they should reproduce, while others without these desirable traits should not reproduce. Eugenics is a horrible concept that was used by the Nazis. But when we think about genetic engineering, we could see this as a form of eugenics, since we are giving a parent a right to choose the appearance of their child, or the personality traits of their child, or even to remove undesirable traits from their children. This is clearly a form of unnatural selection, which also alters a relationship between a parent and their child. Through my research, I was able to see that there are many pros of genetic manipulation, but there are also many cons to the science, and ones that could be very dangerous because they promote such monstrous mentalities. The photo on the top left corner represents a designer baby, which is what I talked about, where a parent will be able to choose the traits of their child. To its right, there is a photo of eugenics. So basically in this photo, they are measuring the length of this man's face, which is clearly a horrible thing, but this is what represents eugenics. Now that I have explained the historic and ethical components of my research paper, I would like to give some concluding remarks as well as some solutions that I have found through my research that could set some boundaries for this new science. So in order to find a balance between the two pros and cons of the science, bioethics prof. Matthew Lyo put in place a list of conditions that he believes would deem an experiment ethical versus non-ethical. For example, one of his conditions entails that if a parent has the opportunity to modify a defective gene in their offspring, and this defective gene is something that would prevent them from having a good life, then they have to modify this gene, so delete it through a form of genetic engineering, that it is their moral obligation to do so. I believe that this is a very good way to regulate the issue and set boundaries for experiments. Such condition is fair and reasonable. It is important to sit back and reflect on the necessity of an experiment before we start testing. If all of this is done correctly, then I believe that genetic engineering could be an amazing thing and could be used for endless possibilities. It'll be the future, and we will be able to eliminate ethical issues that arise from it. From my project, I learned that it is very important to not get carried away when something new comes up. We can't get too excited. We need to evaluate it first. We need to sit back, relate it to other technologies that are out there, see what the problems with those technologies are, and try and find solutions to avoid errors. To conclude, I will just recommend that you go watch the documentary on Netflix called Unnatural Selection. It is a 4-part documentary, and it really explains genetic engineering very well and also makes you think and reflect. So for example, they are saying one of the main issues is not knowing what will happen if everyone in the world had access to genetic engineering. So some people think that this would be a good thing, but some people think that this would be a terrible thing because the world will be chaotic. If everyone used genetic engineering to enhance their intellectual and physical abilities, and if it was democratized, what would this mean for us? Because we share an environment and we are one community. So what would happen if someone would want to opt out from this? Would that be a possibility? All of these are unknowns that we will have to face in the future. I really enjoyed this research project. It was my first big research project, and I learned a lot about the process of researching in general, about history, about ethics, and science as well. This video was narrated by me, Daphne Singer, as well as edited by me. This is my bibliography. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.